The first time Michael Johnson held $1 million in his hands, he didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He didn't call the media. Instead, he drove 4 hours back to the tiny town everyone else had escaped, parked beside the rusted wooden house where rain leaked through the roof every winter, walked inside and quietly placed a thick envelope on the old dining table. His mother looked at it with confusion. "What is this?" Michael simply replied. "The first payment." His father laughed. "Payment for what?" Michael looked around the room. The broken refrigerator, the cracked walls, the faded family photographs. The chairs repaired more times than anyone could count. Then he looked at the two people who had spent 35 years sacrificing everything so their children could survive. "For every meal you skipped so we could eat." Silence filled the room. His mother burst into tears. His father couldn't speak, because inside that envelope was enough money to pay off every debt they had ever carried. And that was only the beginning. 5 years later, Michael would build a company worth over $500 million. The same people who once laughed at his dreams would fight for a chance to work for him. But none of them knew the truth. The empire didn't begin with money. It began with a promise made by a hungry 14-year-old boy. 27 years earlier, the Johnson family lived on the forgotten edge of a small rural town where opportunity rarely visited. Their home wasn't really a house anymore. It was a structure barely holding itself together. Whenever heavy rain came, buckets appeared across the living room to catch the water dripping through the ceiling. Every winter, cold air slipped through the cracked walls as if the house itself had surrendered. Michael, the eldest of 5 children, woke every morning before sunrise. At 14 years old, his routine looked nothing like the lives of children he saw on television. He collected water, fed the family's chickens, helped his younger siblings prepare for school, worked odd jobs before classes, returned home to farm until sunset, then completed homework by candlelight because electricity wasn't always available. His father, Samuel Johnson, worked construction whenever contractors needed extra hands. Some weeks there was work. Many weeks there wasn't. His mother, Grace, washed clothes for wealthier families across town. She returned home every evening with swollen hands but still somehow found the strength to cook, or at least to pretend there was enough food. Michael noticed something long before his younger brothers and sisters did. Every dinner, his mother claimed she wasn't hungry. His father always said he had eaten at work. But Michael wasn't a child anymore. He knew the truth. There simply wasn't enough food for everyone. So his parents lied. Every single night. One evening, Michael quietly stayed awake after everyone had gone to bed. He heard whispers coming from the kitchen. "We only have enough rice for tomorrow," Grace whispered. Samuel sighed heavily. "I'll find work." "You said that yesterday." "I know." Silence. Then Samuel spoke again. "Maybe Michael should leave school next year." Grace immediately shook her head. "No. We need another income. He deserves a future. We all deserve one." Her voice finally broke. "But deserving doesn't buy food." Michael stood frozen behind the doorway. Those words changed something inside him forever. That night, he made himself a promise. One day, his parents would never have to worry about money again. Not someday. Not maybe. Definitely. The next morning, he began searching for opportunities. The town offered almost none. He carried groceries, washed cars, cut grass, helped elderly neighbors repair fences. Anything that earned a few dollars. Every coin went into an old metal cookie tin hidden beneath his bed. His siblings thought he was saving for new shoes. He wasn't. He didn't even know what he was saving for. Only that, somehow. This money would become their way out. School became another battlefield. Michael's clothes were old, sometimes too small, sometimes patched together by his mother. His classmates noticed. Teenagers can be cruel. Farmer. "Did your family forget what soap is? Your shoes are older than the principal." Laughter followed him through the hallways. Michael never answered. He simply kept walking. His silence irritated the bullies more than any argument could. One afternoon after school, 3 boys cornered him near the football field. "You think you're better than us because you ignore us?" Michael sighed. "I don't think about you at all." The tallest boy shoved him hard. Michael stumbled backward. Another punch landed against his shoulder. Then another. Years of farm work had made Michael stronger than he looked. He defended himself without throwing unnecessary punches. Within seconds, the boys realized they had chosen the wrong target. They walked away bruised, but louder than before. Rumors spread quickly. Teachers questioned him. He accepted detention without explaining. His father later asked what happened. Michael smiled. "Nothing important. Samuel nodded proudly. Sometimes strength isn't winning fights. Michael looked at him. It's choosing which ones matter. Those words stayed with Michael for years. When he turned 16, another challenge arrived. His father collapsed at work. Years of physical labor had damaged his back. Doctors ordered months of recovery, months without income. The family entered the hardest season of their lives. Bills stacked up. The landlord demanded overdue rent. Utilities were disconnected. One evening, the family sat together in darkness. Only one candle lit the room. Michael watched his younger sister trying to finish homework while shielding the notebook from melting wax. His youngest brother quietly asked, "Are we poor?" Nobody answered. Children notice silence better than words. That night, Michael opened the cookie tin. 3 years of saving. Everything he had, $4,312. To most people, it wasn't much. To Michael, it represented thousands of hours. He carried the tin to his father. Samuel frowned. "What's this?" "Our future." Samuel opened it. His eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" "I earned it." "You've been working this whole time?" Michael nodded. Samuel pushed the tin back. "No. It's yours." "It's ours." "I won't take it." "You already have." "What do you mean?" "You gave me the chance to earn it." His father stared silently, then slowly accepted the tin. Neither man noticed Grace crying quietly from the doorway. For the first time in months, the family paid every overdue bill. They survived. Barely. But Michael understood something powerful. Money wasn't the goal. Freedom was. He became obsessed with learning. The local library became his second home. Business books, biographies, economics, psychology, marketing, sales, leadership. He read everything. Most books were outdated. Some missing pages. It didn't matter. Knowledge cost nothing. The librarian, Mrs. Eleanor Brooks, noticed the determined teenager visiting every afternoon. One day she asked, "What are you looking for?" Michael answered honestly, "A way to make sure my parents never struggle again." She smiled gently. "Then don't just read books." "What else?" "Study people." He frowned. She continued, "Businesses solve problems. The bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity." Those words echoed in his mind for weeks. He began observing everything around town. What frustrated people? What wasted time? What did everyone complain about? At first, nothing stood out, until one rainy afternoon. An elderly farmer walked into the library soaking wet. He complained loudly, "The suppliers keep raising prices." Another farmer agreed, "They know we have no choice." A third added, "And deliveries always arrive late." Michael listened carefully. More farmers joined the conversation. Different people. Same problem. Expensive supplies. Poor service. Limited options. Michael suddenly realized something. There weren't just one or two frustrated customers. There were hundreds, maybe thousands. He spent the next 6 months interviewing farmers after school, taking notes, asking questions, learning everything. The more he learned, the more obvious the opportunity became. The industry hadn't changed in decades. Middlemen controlled prices. Farmers carried all the risk. Nobody was helping the people who produced the food everyone depended on. Michael couldn't stop thinking about it. He filled notebook after notebook with ideas, flowcharts, calculations, business models, potential solutions. Most people saw poor farmers. Michael saw an underserved market worth millions. But there was one problem. Actually, there were two. He had no money. And nobody would ever take an 18-year-old seriously. Still, he refused to quit, because deep inside, that 14-year-old boy who had made a promise to his parents was still waiting to keep it. One evening, as he sat alone at the kitchen table sketching yet another business plan, a rusty pickup truck pulled into the yard. A sharply dressed stranger stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase that looked absurdly expensive against the backdrop of the crumbling house. Michael had never seen him before. The man walked straight to the front door, glanced once at the notebook in Michael's hands through the window, and smiled. "I've been looking for the young man asking everyone in this town questions." Michael slowly stood. Every instinct told him that the next 5 minutes could change the rest of his life. Michael opened the front door cautiously. The stranger looked to be in his late 50s, tall, neatly dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed out of place on the dusty country road. His polished shoes were already collecting dirt, but he didn't appear to care. He extended his hand. "My name's Richard Coleman." Michael shook it. "I'm Michael." "I know." Richard smiled. "In fact, half this town has been talking about you." Michael frowned. They have? They're wondering why an 18-year-old keeps interviewing farmers like he's writing a newspaper. Michael let out a nervous laugh. I'm not writing a newspaper. I didn't think so. Richard's eyes drifted toward the notebook on the kitchen table. May I come in? Michael hesitated before opening the door wider. The tiny house suddenly felt even smaller. His mother quickly wiped her hands on her apron before greeting the visitor. His father, whose back was still healing, slowly stood from his chair. Richard introduced himself politely before accepting a seat at the old dining table. There was an awkward silence. Finally, Richard spoke. I own Coleman Agricultural Distribution. Michael's eyes widened. He had heard of the company. They supplied farming equipment and fertilizer across several states. Compared to businesses in their small town, it was enormous. What brings someone like you here? Michael asked. Richard leaned back. You do? Michael blinked. I've spent 3 days asking people about the young man who's been collecting information. You've been asking about me? Richard nodded. Every farmer said the same thing. He listens. He asks smart questions. He never tries to sell us anything. Then Richard looked directly into Michael's eyes. That's rare. Michael didn't know what to say. Richard pointed toward the notebook. May I see it? Michael slowly pushed it across the table. Richard began turning pages. The room became silent except for paper flipping. One page. Another, graphs, cost breakdowns, supplier comparisons, delivery routes, profit estimates, customer interviews, pages filled with handwritten observations. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No one spoke. Finally, Richard closed the notebook. This, he tapped the cover gently, was written by you? Michael nodded. Every word. Richard remained quiet for a moment. Then he asked something unexpected. Who taught you business analysis? No one. Richard frowned. No one? I learned from library books. You mean, you taught yourself? Michael nodded again. Richard slowly smiled. I've hired graduates from the best business schools. He paused. They've never done research this thorough. Grace and Samuel exchanged confused glances. To them, these were simply notebooks. To Richard, they were something entirely different. He looked back at Michael. What do you want? Michael answered without hesitation. I want farmers to stop getting cheated. Richard laughed softly. I asked what you want. Michael's expression never changed. If I solve their problem, my family will never be poor again. Richard studied him carefully. Most young entrepreneurs he had met wanted sports cars, luxury watches, private jets. Michael wanted none of those. Richard could tell this young man wasn't chasing wealth. He was chasing freedom. And there was a difference. Richard reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a business card. If you're serious, come see me Monday morning. Michael looked at the card. The company headquarters was nearly 3 hours away. I don't have a car. I know. I can't afford the trip. I know. Richard smiled again. Figure it out. Then he stood. If you can solve that problem, maybe you can solve bigger ones. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back. Oh, bring all your notebooks. The pickup disappeared down the road. For several seconds, nobody moved. Finally, Samuel broke the silence. Do you trust him? Michael looked at the business card. I don't know, but I trust the opportunity. Monday morning began before sunrise. Michael borrowed $20 from a neighbor. He took 2 buses, walked nearly 4 miles, arriving at Coleman Agricultural Distribution almost an hour early. The headquarters looked like another world. Glass windows, modern offices, forklifts moving inventory, hundreds of employees. Michael suddenly became aware of his inexpensive clothes, his worn shoes, his faded backpack. He nearly turned around. Then he remembered his mother's swollen hands, his father's damaged back, his siblings studying by candlelight. He kept walking. The receptionist smiled politely. Can I help you? I'm here to see Mr. Coleman. She looked him up and down. Do you have an appointment? Before Michael could answer, Richard appeared from a hallway. He's with me. Several executives looked surprised. Who was this teenager? Richard led him into a conference room. 6 senior managers were already waiting. Michael immediately realized what was happening. This wasn't a meeting. It was a test. Richard introduced him. Gentlemen, this is Michael Johnson. One executive whispered. He's just a kid. Richard heard him. So was Bill Gates once? The room became quiet. Richard looked at Michael. You've spent months studying farmers. Teach us. Michael swallowed. His heart pounded. His hands trembled slightly. Then he opened his notebook. For the next 90 minutes, he forgot to be nervous. He explained everything. Why prices were rising. How middlemen created unnecessary costs. Where deliveries failed. why farmers distrusted suppliers, how technology could improve ordering, how warehouses could reduce waste, how better communication would increase loyalty. Every question received a confident answer. Every statistic came from his own research. Every recommendation had evidence. When he finally stopped speaking, the room was silent. One executive quietly whispered, "Unbelievable." Another leaned toward Richard. "Did he really do this alone?" Richard smiled. "I told you." The oldest executive folded his arms. "Michael, suppose we gave you a chance. What exactly would you build?" Michael walked to the whiteboard. He drew a simple diagram. "Instead of selling products, we build relationships." The executives exchanged puzzled looks. Michael continued, "Most companies think they're in the fertilizer business. They're wrong. They're in the trust business." The room became even quieter. He kept writing. Mobile ordering, transparent pricing, scheduled deliveries, local support teams, educational workshops, customer feedback, community partnerships. Everything connected. Everything solved a real problem. When he finished, Richard slowly stood. "I've been in this industry for 32 years. He looked around the room. "I've never heard anyone explain our customers better." A week later, Richard offered Michael something he had never imagined, a paid internship. The salary wasn't huge, but it was more money than anyone in Michael's family had ever earned consistently. Michael accepted immediately. For the next 2 years, he became obsessed. While others left work at 5, Michael stayed until 9. He learned accounting, supply chains, negotiation, marketing, finance, technology, leadership. Whenever someone retired, Michael volunteered to learn their job: warehouse, purchasing, customer service, sales, transportation. He wanted to understand everything. Employees began calling him the sponge because he absorbed knowledge faster than anyone they'd ever seen. Richard watched quietly. One afternoon he asked, "Why do you work this hard?" Michael answered honestly, "Because poverty doesn't wait." At 22, Michael had saved nearly every paycheck. He still lived at home, still drove an old used truck, still wore inexpensive clothes. His coworkers thought he lacked ambition. They were wrong. He simply had a bigger goal. Then disaster struck. Coleman Agricultural Distribution announced major restructuring, automation, budget cuts, department closures. Hundreds of employees were laid off, including Michael. He carried a small cardboard box containing his belongings toward the parking lot. Some employees cursed, some cried. Others blamed management. Michael simply stood beside his old truck. Richard walked outside. "I'm sorry." Michael smiled. "You don't have to apologize. I've fought to keep you." "I know." Richard looked disappointed. "What will you do now?" Michael looked across the parking lot. "The same thing I planned before I met you." Richard raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "I'm building my own company." Richard laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that." He reached into his jacket pocket. He handed Michael a small envelope. "What's this?" "A goodbye gift." Michael opened it. Inside was a single check, $50,000. Michael stared at it in disbelief. "I can't accept this." "Yes, you can." "It's too much." Richard shook his head. "No." He smiled warmly. "It's an investment." Michael looked confused. "In what?" Richard answered with complete confidence. "In the first billionaire I've ever met." Michael's eyes filled with tears. Nobody had ever believed in him like this. Richard placed a hand on his shoulder. "Money isn't what changes families. Courage does." Then he walked back inside the building. Michael remained standing alone, holding the check, holding his future. 3 months later, Michael rented a tiny warehouse barely larger than a garage. He hired exactly 2 employees, 1 delivery driver, 1 customer support representative. He bought a second-hand computer, used office furniture, 1 pickup truck, a borrowed forklift, and a handmade sign that read, "Johnson Farm Solutions." His competitors laughed. One local businessman joked, "He'll be bankrupt by Christmas." Another laughed, "You can't compete with companies 100 times your size." Michael heard every word. He never responded. Instead, he knocked on one farmer's door after another. Not to sell, to listen, just as he always had. Within 6 months, his first 50 customers became 100, then 200, then 400. Word spread quickly. For the first time, farmers felt like someone actually cared about their success. Michael answered customer calls himself, delivered supplies personally, solved problems immediately. If a delivery truck broke down, he drove through the night. If crops failed, He helped customers renegotiate payment plans. He wasn't building transactions. He was building trust, exactly as he had drawn on that whiteboard years before. By the end of the second year, the tiny warehouse was overflowing. Revenue had crossed $10 million. Banks that had once rejected his loan applications suddenly wanted meetings. Investors started calling every week. Business magazines began asking for interviews. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Michael received a phone call that made his blood run cold. The voice on the other end was calm. "Mr. Johnson, this is the legal department of your largest competitor. We're filing a lawsuit against your company." Michael's grip tightened on the phone. "What for?" The lawyer's reply was chilling. "We intend to stop your business before it becomes impossible to beat." Michael slowly lowered the phone. The office suddenly felt quieter than ever. Outside the window, forklifts continued loading deliveries. Employees laughed as they worked. Phones rang. Orders came in. Life went on. But inside Michael's mind, everything had stopped. His largest competitor had finally made its move. Not by improving their service, not by lowering their prices, not by winning customers fairly. They wanted to bury him in court. His assistant, Sarah, noticed the change on his face. "Michael?" He forced a smile. "We've got a problem." "How bad?" "They're suing us." The room fell silent. Within minutes, every department manager was gathered around the conference table. Some were scared. Others were angry. One manager slammed his fist on the table. "They're trying to destroy us." Another suggested, settling immediately. "We can't afford years in court." Everyone looked at Michael. He remained calm. "Has anyone here stolen anything?" Heads shook. "Have we lied to customers?" "No." "Have we broken the law?" "No." Michael stood. "Then we're not fighting because we're guilty." He looked around the room. "We're fighting because we're right." His confidence spread through the room like fire. Fear slowly became determination. For the next 6 months, the lawsuit dominated everything. Lawyers, depositions, documents, long nights, endless meetings. The competitor hoped Michael would run out of money before the case ended. They underestimated one thing: the loyalty of his customers. When farmers heard what was happening, they responded in a way no one expected. One customer recorded a video. "They're attacking the only company that treated us with respect." Another shared his experience online. "They helped me stay in business when everyone else abandoned me." Then hundreds joined in. Thousands. Stories flooded social media. News stations picked it up. The public began asking a simple question: if this company is so bad, why do customers love them so much? Pressure shifted. The lawsuit that was supposed to destroy Johnson Farm Solutions became the biggest advertisement the company had ever received. Orders doubled, then tripled. Investors who had ignored Michael before started calling daily. One afternoon, Sarah walked into Michael's office carrying a thick folder. "You should see this." Michael opened it. "Investment offers. $20 million. $35 million. $50 million. Every firm wanted a piece of the company." Sarah smiled. "We finally made it." Michael closed the folder. "No, we're just getting started." 3 months later, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, farmers, employees, executives from competing companies. Everyone waited for the judge's decision. Michael sat quietly beside his attorney. Across the room, executives from the rival company looked confident. The judge entered. Everyone stood. After several minutes of legal explanations, the ruling came. The lawsuit was dismissed. Every major claim failed. The judge even criticized the competitor for attempting to use litigation to suppress fair competition. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward Michael. "Cameras are here." "Mr. Johnson, how do you feel?" Microphones surrounded him. He could have celebrated. He could have mocked his competitors. Instead, he simply said, "We didn't win because we're bigger. We won because doing the right thing lasts longer than doing the easy thing." That single sentence appeared in newspapers across the country. The next morning, Johnson Farm Solutions became a nationally recognized brand. Success arrived faster than anyone imagined. Within 3 years, the company expanded into 8 states, then 12, then 20. Technology teams built software that allowed farmers to order supplies from their phones. Artificial intelligence predicted inventory needs before shortages happened. Delivery routes became smarter. Waste dropped dramatically. Customers saved millions. Employees shared in the company's success through profit sharing. Michael refused to build a company where only executives became wealthy. Warehouse workers earned bonuses. Drivers earned bonuses. Customer support teams earned bonuses. Every Christmas, employees received handwritten letters from Michael. Not printed, handwritten. Many framed them in their homes. People stopped leaving the company. Instead, the best workers from competitors began applying. One evening, Sarah entered Michael's office holding another report. She couldn't stop smiling. "You need to see this." Michael looked up from his laptop. "What is it?" She placed the report on his desk. An independent valuation from a global investment bank. Michael read the number once. Then again. He leaned back quietly. Company valuation, $512 million. For several moments, he simply stared. Sarah expected excitement, celebration, maybe even tears. Instead, Michael closed the report. "Book me a flight home." She looked confused. Home? Tomorrow? The following afternoon, Michael drove down the same narrow road he had traveled thousands of times as a child. The old house still stood. The roof had been repaired years earlier. The walls were freshly painted. Flowers grew in the front yard. His parents still refused to move. "This house raised us," his mother always said. His younger brothers and sisters were already waiting outside. Children ran across the yard. Grandchildren laughed together. The entire family had gathered. Michael stepped out of the car carrying only a small folder. His mother hugged him tightly. "You've lost weight." Michael laughed. "You always say that." His father embraced him next. "I'm proud of you." Michael smiled. "I learned from you." Everyone gathered around the dining table. The very same table where, years earlier, he had placed that first envelope. Michael opened the folder. "I have something for everyone." His youngest sister laughed. "Another surprise?" He nodded. One by one, he handed each family member an envelope. Nobody opened them immediately. His father looked confused. "What is all this?" Michael took a deep breath. "When I was 14, I made a promise." His voice grew quieter. "I promised that one day, none of you would ever worry about money again." His mother was already crying. Michael continued, "You've sacrificed your dreams, so ours could survive." He looked at his father. "You worked until your back gave out." Then at his mother, "You skipped meals so we could eat." He smiled gently. "I never forgot." His father slowly opened the envelope. Inside was the deed to a beautiful home overlooking a peaceful lake. His hands began shaking. His mother opened hers. A document establishing a lifelong monthly income that would cover every expense for the rest of her life. Each sibling received something different. Homes, college funds for their children, investment accounts, businesses fully funded, every debt already paid. Nobody spoke. The room filled with tears. Finally, Samuel stood. He walked slowly toward Michael. Without saying a word, he wrapped both arms around his son. For the first time in Michael's life, he felt his father crying. "I always wanted to give you everything," Samuel whispered. Michael held him tighter. "You already did." Months later, Michael was invited to speak at a university. The auditorium was full. Thousands of students waited to hear the billionaire entrepreneur. One student stood during the question session. "If you lost every dollar tomorrow, what would you do?" The room became silent. Michael smiled. "I'd go back to solving problems." The student looked puzzled. Michael continued, "Money is a result. It isn't the cause. The cause is value." He paused. "My company wasn't worth $500 million because I wanted $500 million. It became valuable because millions of dollars worth of problems disappeared for our customers." The audience erupted into applause. Another student asked, "What was your greatest investment?" Everyone expected him to mention technology, or real estate, or the stock market. Michael smiled. "The greatest investment I ever made was believing my family's story didn't have to end where it started." Years passed. The Johnson family became known not for their wealth, but for their generosity. Scholarships for first-generation college students, affordable housing projects, small business grants, agricultural education programs. Thousands of families found opportunities because one family had once experienced poverty. One rainy evening, Michael visited the old library where everything had begun. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks was now retired. She sat reading in her favorite corner. When she looked up and saw Michael, she smiled. "I was wondering when you'd come back." Michael laughed. "You were right." She closed her book. "About what?" "You told me businesses solve problems." She smiled knowingly. "And?" Michael looked around the quiet library. "I spent years thinking I was building a company." He shook his head. "I wasn't. I was keeping a promise." Mrs. Brooks nodded. "The best businesses usually begin that way. As Michael walked outside, rain began falling softly, just like the night he had overheard his parents worrying about food. Only this time, he wasn't afraid of tomorrow. He looked up at the sky and smiled. Some people inherit wealth. Some inherit businesses. Some inherit powerful connections. Michael Johnson inherited none of those. He inherited something far more valuable. Parents who taught him integrity without saying the word, sacrifice without asking for recognition, love without expecting repayment. In the end, the greatest achievement wasn't building a company worth over $500 million. It wasn't becoming wealthy. It wasn't earning headlines. It was fulfilling the promise a hungry 14-year-old boy made in a house with a leaking roof. One day my family will never be poor again.